Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Game 2 of the Wombat Invitational Tournament. For those of you who have not watched Game 1, please click over and you can watch that here. Alright, so what do we got going on here? We've got a ROTE setup, and this is the Imperial player is Joke, and the Rebel player is Kornel. So now a couple of reminders about this. So this is a 3-on-3 tournament with 3 games. It's Wombat, Joke, and EZ against Kornel, Oso, and Stardancer. Each team randomly selected the order of players that would play in predetermined maps. So the first map was from Tournament 1 was a base setup. Emphasis on getting lots of plastic out on the board. This second map was designed by another Discord player, Cookie, or Alistair Cookie, and it's a ROTE Deployment map. Okay, so this is Joe playing the Empire on ROTE, and Kornel playing the Rebels. Each player could still select their own deck. They could select a base deck or the ROTE deck. It didn't matter. So only the loyalties and the deployments were selected. So let's see what's going on here. We got a Death Star under construction in Tatooine, which sort of makes sense because since there's no Rhodia, you can at least subjugate Bothui there. Some kind of spread out deployment on Coruscant, which also makes sense, trying to drop that loyal relatively quickly. You can see the Empire starts with a loyal Mustafar as well. So decision needs to be made about what to do about covering that kind of Endor region. Also hard to cover the Ilum and Dantooine region as well. Assuming you drop a fleet on Coruscant, a fleet up in Seleucami, and then some sort of defense up with the Death Star up north here. ROTE deployment's always an interesting one for me. I like to do it from time to time to just kind of mix things up. For those who don't know the kind of house rule, you can see I have an X on Dagobah, meaning no putting the Death Star under construction in Dagobah. That creates a little bit of an interesting situation here with Naboo not being able to be subjugated either and putting a couple move steps away from Utapau, right? So lots of decision making to make for the Empire here. If you only have one carrier or one star destroyer up by the Death Star, you have to make the decision of if you want to go towards Geonosis to cover Utapau or if you want to prevent that speeder from being made. Similarly, if you don't put a solid fleet up in Seleucami, then you're going to risk a loyal Mon Cal and a loyal Utapau if the rebels get contingency plan or something along that line. So we'll see what Kornel's up to here. It looks like he's going with deployment down in the Megiddo region, probably to pick off that planet there and also keep a limited amount of troops in the base. To prevent 2 probes being drawn from gather intel. So you got a nice strike force in a weak region for the Empire. That's a pretty standard thing for rebels to do. He did not go after the assault carrier in Mustafar or in Mandalore. One thing to think about with the ROTE deployment is if you're going to leave alone assault carrier, it's not a bad idea to drop 4 starfighters there. What that does is it lets the TIE fighter card be played if the rebels decide to attack it. Now granted, they can cancel it with a Corvette card, but it still provides some decent firepower and usually requires the rebels to consider whether or not it's worth taking down. Now you can see Kornel's objective was Heart of the Empire. So by dropping those items, by those troops in Ilum, it allows you to do both attacking Megiddo and also playing the transport retreat card to pull back to Ord Mantell. So kind of 2 birds with 1 stone there. All right, we got Empire. We got Mahdi out on Corellia to help prevent a sabotage. We've got the Emperor on a mission, and again, it's ruled by fear. And this camera issue, actually, I resolve it about halfway through this game. So again, my apologies for the view on the camera being a little bit off here. All right, we start with a Vader move out to Moncal in Dodonna with a infiltrate over in Megiddo. Makes sense. And, in some world, maybe you play infiltrate on top of Vader, likely to succeed, and also gives an outside of the box chance to block that rule by fear. You could also just rule by fear in Corellia too, so hard to know what the right move there is. All right, tag subjugating. So we've got one subjugated planet threatening to take loyalty in Moncal. And then Riken's got to make a decision on a sabotage here. So sabotaging the assault carrier, which makes sense. The Emperor is not on R&D. It's one of the downsides to Mahdi. If you grab Mahdi, it's hard to know what to grab. Emperor does a rule by fear. He does it in the location where Tarkin and Mahdi are. So then Leia has to make the decision on whether or not to try to block that or score the objective. And she'll go with the objective and still leaving the majority of the strike force behind. Now, why not attack Megiddo? Well, if you do attack Megiddo, you're at risk of having to deal with the Empire early next turn too. So I think he figures doesn't mind the TIE fighter going out. All right, new objective pulled is Regional Aid, so we'll have to see how Kornel plays that. And you can see in his hand he's got a hit and run and Wookiee Uprising. 2 hit and runs, actually, and a rescue card. Empire, pan down briefly. Not a whole lot of great cards there. We got Piet's card, draw them out. Jabba's card, which is probably the worst in the game. Going to be an interesting shift here. For those of you who are newer to the game, if you do play ROTE Deployment, like if you do play the ROTE units, the kind of general rule of thumb is no putting the Death Star under construction in Dagobah. The reason we do that is if you put it in Dagobah, you can subjugate Utapau and Moncal on the first round and really hamper the Rebels' ability to produce units. So oftentimes the house rule on Discord is the Empire can choose to play the ROTE deployment setup if there is no Salakami loyalty or subjugation, meaning Moncal can't be reached, and if that's the case, then you can put the Death Star under construction in Dagobah. Otherwise, if you play ROTE deployment, general rules of thumb, or if you have Salakami, you do not put the Death Star under construction in Dagobah. It's just a little bit too crippling. That being said, go Empire. You can do whatever you want. Doesn't really bother me in one way or the other. All right, so we've got a hit and run in play for the Rebels and Kornel. And then Empire's got to figure out where they want to go here. So you got to put some pressure on Utapau and Naboo. That could come up from Corellia. It could come down from the Death Star. They just got to cover Geonosis this turn, probably. Unless you're going to give away Moncals, which, could be a thing. Maybe the game's not hard enough already. Maydeen dropping a hit and run, trying to take out that assault carrier. I am oftentimes, and take this with a grain of salt, because I lose more games than I win, I feel like. Oftentimes, if Rebels are trying to hit and run and I have Vader available, oftentimes I'll try to block that. I like to think about, would I spend a leader action to deploy a assault carrier on the map? And if so, oftentimes I'll try to block that. Same decision-making process gets made when like a card like Demolition gets played. If it's going to take off a Star Destroyer and an assault carrier, I'll think to myself, if Vader's available and I try to block it, if there's a likelihood I'll succeed, would I spend Vader to, would I spend a leader to, to get a Star Destroyer and a assault carrier on board? And the answer is yes, because anytime I have address delays, I play that too. So anyway, I guess just something to think about there. Okay, Star Destroyer coming down south, skipping Kashyyyk, reinforcing the area that just got shredded by Medine. Riggin with a rapid. And we got Tarkin and Emperor on missions here. Tarkin's probably the most flexible Imperial leader to drop on something. It can be a logistics mission, it could be a gather intel, all sorts of things on there. But in this case, he's just cleaning up the sabotage on Mustafar, trying to prep that for an assault carrier next turn. And we've got Mothma and Leia left. Mothma on Build Alliance. And note, he's got regional aid as a mission, so dropping Mothma on Ord gives a few different options. It builds towards regional aid. It lets him deploy a couple more troops there. He's still got the transport. Palpatine going on about building Star Destroyers. Leia does not decide to block that. And instead, the Rebels are going to consolidate in Megiddo with their secondary force. Now, the primary force can't move. Oh, nope, he's not. He's just going to blockade it. Okay, so that seems like an interesting decision. Idea there to... I don't think Empire's got anything to deploy second-handed there. Veer's picking up Toydaria. And then Vader out to make a decision on which direction to go here. Okay, so Kornel has managed to kind of pull all the Imperial fleet in two different sections. You got two Star Destroyers next to each other in Alderaan and Mandalore. Then you've got the Star Destroyer and the Death Star up in Tatooine and Geonosis. So right now, kind of the middle and the edges of the board are free. The Endor region's pretty much wide open. And then the Rapid, instead of to look at cards, used to consolidate forces. So nice move there by Kornel. No regional aid yet, but he's working towards building it there with dropping the loyalty in Ord. Have to see if Joke is watching for that or not. Also pulled cut supply lines. So cut supply lines is a tough one if you don't know what's coming up and it catches you off guard. In this case, I think there was an infiltrate, so Kornel probably knew, but sometimes that'll help you make the decision of whether or not you drop sabotages on, systems like Bothaway would be a good target if you're trying to score cut supply lines, or, systems that are tough. You got to rule by fear and then remove the sabotage, or sometimes rule by fear twice. Alright, Kornel dropping 2 in the base, 2 in Ord. Looks like the Ord people are going hunting here, maybe. And then we've got Collect Bounty and Propaganda pulled by Joke here. Okay, got Infiltrate, Sabotage, Build Alliance, another Rapid coming out. Rebel sitting on a Subterfuge, not Subterfuge. I always get the name of that card wrong. The cancel card. Alright, Dodonna pulling an objective off the top. Level 2 objectives are usually pretty nice. In this instance, we get Time for Peace, which is a guaranteed objective to score. It just requires a massive amount of sacrifice to get. So we'll see how that plays out. He was probably hoping for Liberation or something fun like that. So much of the storytelling of this game has to do with objectives that get pulled, and how easy they are to score really kind of shapes the way the game plays here. I really enjoy that aspect of it. Subversion, that's the name of it. Alright, so we got a Subversion and a Hit and Run with Wedge. Also worth pointing, Wedge is sitting on 1 in a million, so pulling likely that Nebulon ends up going into the base with all those starfighters there is my guess on this next turn. Alright, Medine opening with an Infiltrate. And, you know, you've probably heard me say on another video, depending on how many of these you watch, that oftentimes I feel like if rebels open with infiltrate, I'm not too worried about their leftover missions after that. I would have expected, you know, in this case, that statement is incorrect because Wedge did not open with an attack, and he did not open with the hit and run. A lot of times I see opening with hit and run to take away a assault carrier from moving. Alright, attacking the transport. Transport tries to kill the TIE fighter. Imperial player plays the interdictor card. Means he's probably not planning on building an interdictor here. Transport's dead. Ord is just got a pile of angry rebels underneath it. Only moved the Star Destroyer in, didn't bring the rest of the troops. If that were me, I'd probably bring the troops in. The troops would probably get massacred, and I'd probably end up with a confronted Mahdi. So, you know, Joe's probably making the right decision here. All right, you can see Mothma making a play for regional aid by grabbing Seleucid. And Veer's coming over to subjugate Utapau. You can see the missions that rebels are on here. I think there's a build alliance in there, so we'll see where that pops up. And now Kornel working towards cut supply lines with sabotaging Geonosis. Yep, Empire following up with a propaganda. Leia tries to block. This is going to be a big roll here. Roll 2 and 2. You can discard R2-D2, every Imperial's favorite droid, and then block propaganda. Or, oh, maybe not. Maybe he rolled 3. Maybe I counted that wrong. Alright, fair enough. Anyway, propaganda blocked. He had the right idea. If you see Leia back to block, a lot of the times, if you're going to try to pull off a mission, you want to try to, you know, maybe, for example, if he had moved with Mahdi to Utapau, then Mahdi could have added to the propaganda roll. I think the reason to move with Veers is to prevent the sabotage. So just lots of layers and decision making on there. All right, Wedge coming in to try to wipe out that assault carrier. It looks like he's going to do it. 2, 4, 5 to 2, 3, 4, 5. Nope, never mind. Blocked. And a capture. Got 1 for the Empire. Oh, you know what? I did that out of order. Boba tried to capture Wedge, failed. Vader ruled by fear in Geonosis. Alright, that's where we're at. So no captured leader, did get a rule by fear and an R&D pulled off in Geonosis. Kornel gets away with regional aid, so that's 2 objectives scored. He's got a nice pace going so far. Be interesting to see what gets deployed here. So because the rebels have Celeste, they could build a shield generator and then shred it with Time for Peace later, and they could keep that Nebulon on queue for a little bit longer. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of decisions are made here. All right, we got Lando, one of my least favorite Imperials or rebel leaders here. And then we got some deployment to go on here. Again, my apologies for this camera issue here. You can see briefly there we pulled trade relations. Unfortunately, I don't have the probe map up and running either because of the way I filmed it. I cannot see the Imperial probe draws, so it's a little bit of an unfortunate situation. If I remember correctly, about halfway through this map it gets fixed, and then for game 3 it's fully resolved. And for those of you who are keeping score, Easy won the first game here, so it's Imperials 1, Rebel Scum 0. And that also means that game 3, which we'll play regardless of the outcome here, will be Oso versus Wombat. And that one, for those of you who were in the tournament, Dolphins tournament last year, which, by the way, we have a couple of those games posted too. You can find his games recorded if you scroll up in the Discord. Last year's tournament finals game, we are playing on this next round, Oso and I. And that's a base deployment game with a subjugated Corellia, loyal, I believe, Nebu, Bothwy, and Kashyyyk, and Imperials able to subjugate everything on turn one. So leaves the Empire with a bunch of decisions to make. All right, Rebels running a secret mission and seeking Yoda. We'll see which hero becomes a Jedi here. Probably be Leia? I think it's Leia. Nope, looks like it's Lando. All right, so Wedge on missions, Madine back, Leia back. That's right, she's got R2 already, so no sense in giving her the Yoda ring. All right, you can see here the Rebels have got a pretty sizable force built up in the base, a couple of speeders, and opening with an infiltrate with Dodonna to take a look at these missions here. Got a Heart of the Empire or Death Star plans, so those are two interesting draws here. Heart of the Empire, you've got a lot of troops in Ord, although they're covered by a Star Destroyer. You've also got the ability to, do a hit and run on the single trooper in Coruscant, and then maybe do a hidden fleet, something along that lines. So kind of a fun objective to hold on to, and by fun I mean terrible. All right, Reekin's running a secret mission. And grabs Mothma's Trade Relations. It's a good card, especially when you only have one Mon Cal out on the board currently. Emperor's going to go put the kibosh on the X-Wing here. Play a no heal card. And the X-Wing is toast. It's a safe play to go ahead and put Lando in Dagobah right now, since that Star Destroyer in Utapau has already moved. No chance of a easy capture there. Alright, Vader's covering his edges here. This is kind of the late stage, early game for the Empire here. A lot of the times this is kind of where you've kind of spread your fleets out a little bit, done a lot of subjugating, and kind of the easy builds the Rebels have are usually covered up, and then this is kind of the stage in the game where the Rebels start doing missions. This is often a time in the game where, myself included, I'll see Imperials, kind of run too many missions, and then what happens is the Rebels will free up lots of spaces, and then it's kind of hard to recommit your forces back to covering everything up. Okay, Mothma building in Bespin, Vaden to cover up Selust. Selust? I think it's Selust is what somebody told me. And then after a pass, we've got Jabba running a loyalty mission, and Leia with her trusty droid back to cover. So sometimes when this happens, you have to think, like, do you just want to convert this to a rule by fear so it goes off, or is it worth trying to cover up a loyalty here? I feel like this is probably the same play I make here. Nothing worse than R2-D2 ruining your day on a mission. They get a ATS or AT-AT out of it next round too. One thing to consider up here, Kornel's got the shield bunker on 1 ready to deploy. He's also holding on to a time to peace, so it'll be interesting to see whether or not he decides to hold on to that or if he decides to go ahead and deploy it. I've also got a Star Destroyer sitting on Kashyyyk and Wookiee Uprising in hand too. Alright, so we got Heart of the Empire here for Kornel. We're going to go ahead and jump ahead to deployment. Alright, you can see the shield bunker staying on queue. Means we're probably going to start prepping for time to peace here. Other eligible spots to deploy are really just Bespin. Bespin or the base. So stuff the base full of fighters. And then get some Imperial troops out here too. So Joke's got a pretty nice spread of Imperial capital ships around. He's got the Death Star up north in that quadrant. Got another Star Destroyer in Kashyyyk that with AC sprinkled out in Moncal. So some pretty good coverage here. All right, you can see Kornel's planning to run covert operations to grab a level 3, and then also an infiltrate to burn through 2 more. Got Mothma on trade relations. Empire on this turn, 4 missions: gather intel, capture R&D, and rule by fear. So let's see what the rebels open up with here. I would assume it would be Wookiee Uprising. Hard to pass up a card that destroys an on-map Star Destroyer. It's kind of like a really good version of Demolition if you happen to get a guy over there. Empire's going to run a gather intel with Jabba, 3 probes. No blocking this time. Rebels running all missions. Covert ops. And then this is a pretty standard Rebel tactic here too for all you new players out here. Kind of lead with a hero that has a lot of strength. So like that could be Madine doing an infiltrate, that could be Chewie doing uprising, and then stack your other Rebel leaders on top of there to try to minimize the chances of a capture. If you, as an Imperial, are predicting that's what the Rebels are going to do, and you've kept a fist icon back that's extra, when they open with their hit and run or their Wookiee Uprising, you can always try to block it and then follow up immediately with a capture. So for example, if you had Krennic's Finest on capture and Chewbacca tried to do a Wookiee Uprising, you could try to block it with Vader, because if the uprising succeeds, it's going to kill your transport anyway, right? So you can try to block it with Vader. Maybe you block it if you get lucky, but even if you don't, then you can immediately try a capture with Krennic's Finest, and you'll be, 5 and 2 greens on 3 against Chewbacca, instead of if you don't try to block the initial mission and then you just try to capture with Krennic's Finest, then you're on 2 and 2 on 3. Not as good of an odds there. So you can also just kind of forego the capture and hope that they move within striking distance here. So here, for example, Mothma picking up loyalty over in Mustafar. You can then move the Seleucid fleet over on top and then run the capture that way too. So just depends on who you're playing and all that. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. Kornel's got a Insight Rebellion available, so I think he does. Maybe he doesn't. He's got a score seize control, so he's got a nice target there with the Bothawi shield bunker, if you can pull that off. Alright. Subjugated with Veers. Leia doing a build alliance out in Cato, now that the Star Destroyer has moved out of range of covering. Gonna follow up with a capture over here on Mothma. Again, guys, I know I've said it before. I apologize for this camera angle. I fixed it. I fixed it for the third game, or at least partway through the third game. I think it's partway through the third game, but in this particular game, it is just off kilter. I upgraded my computer because it was falling apart, and which actually was a lot easier than I thought it was. I've got an old Acer here, or no, Asus? I don't know. I don't know anything about computers. Anyway, it runs better now, but I was messing around with my settings and managed to relocate the camera in an incorrect sort of way up here. Alright, Mahdi covering Seleucid again. And then a Rule by Fear up in Mustafar. Take away the loyalty there that was gained. Then an R&D to grab a card. And here we go, back. Oh, I guess I did fix it here. Look at that. All right, I like this. Can take a gander at the probe maps we got going on here. Action cards we're still holding on to. We've got good intel ready for action, and looks like the Emperor's card here as well. All right, we're blowing up the shield bunker, a Nebulon, and probably a trooper, I would assume. Nope, gonna blow up gonna blow up a trooper. Time for peace. Nothing says peace like murdering people who have not yet deployed. Telling you, man, everybody thinks the rebels are the good guys. The Empire is actually the good guys here. Keep an open mind. And, yeah. Alright, Joke catching up on his probe map here a little bit. Let's take a look at what's left to be covered. We've got Ilum, got Yavin, Endor, yeah, and Cato. Haven't been to Cato yet either. All right, you can take a look at the stuff we have to deploy here. We got the Executor on spot 2, and a whole bunch of plastic by Joke. So it looks like we're in for probably a pretty big round here. Let's see what the Rebels have in store. So because we've got a Y-Wing deployed on Bespin, I want to think, well, what's that Y-Wing doing? It's probably going to try to pick off that assault carrier that I'm mousing over right now. Kornel has not yet played the Y-Wing card, so assuming that assault carrier gets taken out, that would be one more turn to get down to Endor. So that deployment definitely makes me think Endor for the base. And boy, we got a lot of Star Destroyers out there. Rebels not looking too promising. Alright, let's see what we got going here. Got Lando and Medine on a mission. Probably a rescue. I didn't notice. Yep. Go ahead and use Obi-Wan's rescue and then draw a card. It's like an anti-objective for the Imperials. Getting that card off. Now, in theory, could you have kept Yularen back to block that? Maybe. But then you're stuck. Alright, quick notes on here for gathering intel. So it looks like we know the base is in Endor now with the last couple gather intels. And Regan is going to put some bunkers into the base. And we got Vader coming over. Oh, no we don't. Vader tried to block it and failed. Then we got Tag covering Cato. Kind of a defensive move just to make sure you don't want to overcommit everything down to Endor, but he, since he already drew the probe, he probably still needed to stop deployment from coming in behind. And we've got think my notes said he already drew Yavin too. Sorry guys, it's been a while since I've watched this video, so it's like me watching it all over again for the first time. Alright, Super Star Destroyer out. Got 2 Super Star Destroyers on the queue now. It's my type of game. I love it. And we got Wedge dropping a Sabotage on top of the Death Star. So we got a chance to block it here with Veers. Let's see what we end up doing. Wedge running a Sabotage there means Dodonna is most likely on playing the Assault. So it's might be the end for the Death Star. And we got the base on Yavin. Look at that. All right. Well, Yavin it is. Now, Star Destroyer and 3 ties, obviously not going to win this. And oftentimes the Rebels will open with fleet logistics to block hits. So sometimes I'd like to just play extra damage. Although Kornel's also blocking, in this instance, a direct, a red, and a black. So at the moment, we've got... Oh, actually not a bad roll. Holy cow. 5 critical hits. So a red and a black get blocked, but still 3... Or a red and... Oh, maybe he blocked black. Yep. I think we're... Yeah, and then the red damage got blocked. Yep, that's right. So no directs were blocked. Okay, so Joke just took out a ton of starfighters, which right before the plan the assault run too. It's a well played maneuver there, Joke. All right, Mahdi is going to pay for it for being too aggressive there, but he did his job for sure. Triggered the base. Wipe the starfighters. Things are looking pretty good. Then they dropping the 501st off to do as much damage as they can. All right. So Mahdi is toast. And then we need to... You know what? Just think about that for a minute here with my Empires, the good guys. What do Imperial people do to rebels? We capture them, right? We ask them questions. We let them go back to their base with homing beacon. What do you guys do? You confront us and murder us on the battlefield. No honor, man. All right, Dodonna's planning the assault. less starfighter power than he had previously. So he's still got 1 in a million with Wedge. He's still got remove 2 damage. So Joke's got to do 3 total damage with Veers on the U-Wing. And he's going to go ahead and kill the Mon Cal as well with the Death Star, which I think is probably the right move. I mean, you could drop it on the U-Wing, but there's a reasonable chance he heals that, and then... Like, how sad to let a Mon Cal live, which it's going to live anyway. Those things are so hard to kill, man. All right, 3, and he can remove 2 more from it, so we're going to need a good roll to take that out. We need to for sure take that U-Wing out, which will take at least 3 hits. 3 black hits. Veers gets 1 reroll or crits. And, yeah, looks like he's there. So 1, 2, 3 hits on the Y-Wing, on the U-Wing, 3 hits on the Mon Cal, takes it to 6, he can remove 2, and both are dead. Very nice roll. All the ties are there, and then the Nebulon cannot run a Death Star plan in. Whew, big battle. Yep. All right, 2 extra damage assigned to the Corvette. The Corvette heals. Correct move's probably to assign that to the Nebulon, but the Nebulon was never going to hang out anyway. Rebels are going to retreat, and they only have one spot to retreat to, which is Malastare. So we'll go ahead and go there. Man, what a cool chain of events that was. I really like the storytelling in Rebellion. You know, when I play, I mean, don't get me wrong, I get totally tilted when the story is not going in the favor of the Empire, but I really like the storytelling aspect here. You know, you got Mahdi who found the base, he was trapped, had a big heroic effort to take out all of the starfighters that were preparing to plan the assault. One lone starfighter gets away. Old man Dodonna's driving the Y-wing around, or the U-wing around, trying desperately to blow up the Death Star. It fails. Yeah. All right, here's the Incite Rebellion to score Seize Control. So now we're kind of in the end game here. It's heading into turn 7. The Rebels are drawing level 3 objectives, and they only need 2 more objectives to win. Now the Empire knows where the base is, and the Rebels are short on units, right? They've only got 2 capital ships, and they're out. So Joke's got to figure out how to get his troops to Mandalore and how to prevent Kornel from scoring an additional point. So he played Show No Fear, so that will not score a point this round, but it'll score a point automatically every other round. Okay, so for those of you watching at home, if Kornel figures out how to pull off a mission here, or an objective, he will score 2, and that will end the game. Joke needs at least 1 turn to get his Star Destroyer and his troops up to Mandalore, and then his Star Destroyer to not die, and then 1 more turn to walk the Star Destroyer up and have a massive ground battle here. So, going to deploy a super and a troop. Can consolidate that in Mandalore. Can bring his Star Destroyer up with 2 troops, and can deploy 2 troops on Alderaan as well. Now, you have to think to yourself here. You always have to be careful as Empire here, and you have to think, how can the Rebels score points, and what can I do to potentially prevent those from happening, right? So you got to count loyalty. You can see Kornel's got, I think it was either Major Victory or Raid Outposts, right? So a common mistake is to drop 3 health worth of units on somewhere, and then, you know, he can attack out and get it. So for example, if Kornel had Major Victory, he could score it over Kashyyyk. He could score it over, just over Kashyyyk right now. Which, to be fair, is sabotage. Not a whole lot you could do about that. He can raid factory in Megiddo. He can raid factory in Coruscant, probably in Utapau up in the corner. So you got to think about what can you do to prevent the Rebels from scoring, so you can get to where you need to get to at the base. All right, everybody's all set. Wedge is opening with an attack from Bespin. Got a U-wing that brought over a... No, there it is. All right, so Kornel attacking Celeste. Brings over a speeder. Drops the speeder. And then uses 1 in a million to blow up the stormtrooper. That triggers Raid Outposts. Okay, so Raid Outposts is triggered. Kornel goes up 1 spot. He will gain 1 more through Show No Fear. And then the turn marker will advance. And that'll go up to turn 8. Now, Joke had a stolen plans, or retrieved the plans, but didn't have time to pull it off. Pretty cool little adventure there. Fun times. This was a good one to watch. Rebels evened it up. Who knew? So Rebel victory round 8, 2 combat objectives, 1 show no fear, and the current score is Rebel Scum 1 and the Empire 1. Next up is me versus Oso. See you guys soon.